afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have a very special guest today with us on the Keeping It Real show. John is an ex-FBI agent, and this is probably one of the things I would have never expected to actually have someone with such a diverse background, that too from FBI, on our show. I've known John personally. I got a chance to attend some of his sessions in the San Diego area. John is here with us. He's going to share extraordinary insights along his long, illustrious career. John, welcome to Keeping It Real show.
Thank you, Adi. You're far too kind. But yeah, I'm looking forward to keeping it real as well. So thank you. It's good to be here.
Glad to say that. Could you just give us an overview of your career, John, for our audience so that they get to know you a little better before we dive in?
Yeah, happily. So yeah, I was in the FBI, as you indicated, for 27 plus years.
Wow.
Majority of that career was certainly as a special agent investigating a variety of different criminal activity.
Hmm.
The latter half of my career was spent leading cybercriminal programs out of the San Diego FBI field office. Early in the career, it was crimes against children. I
Oh,
was there in the bureau for 9/11 and a
wow.
variety of other, yeah, phenomenal career. Very proud, very happy to have gone through that. I
Okay.
retired in 2019. And so now we're coming up on 5 years. I
Five
can't
years.
believe it. I know, right? When I left the FBI, I became director of information or director of cybersecurity for the biotech Illumina there
Hmm.
in San Diego. And then I did that for a while. And then I really went back to consulting because I think you could probably say, in a lot of respects, the FBI is a consulting gig,
Hmm. Yeah.
consulting the American people on how not to commit crime or to behave themselves. And then currently, in present day, executive vice president and CISO for a San Diego based security company, Trident Group.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I provide a lot of security consulting, whether it's vCISO,
Hmm.
tabletop exercises,
Hmm.
program assessments, you name it. So
Oh,
that kind of brings us current, if you will.
glad to hear that. Probably
Yeah.
the kind of incidents you spoke about just got, wow, that should have been some of the massive assignments you would have undertaken.
Yeah. Yep.
So, having spoken about that, can you share some of the most complex situations you would have encountered during your time at FBI, and how did you resolve them, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably easiest to go through a little chronology of how the FBI approached cyber, right?
Okay.
And cyber investigations throughout my career. So I was there in the bureau when cyber kind of became a thing in the
Hmm.
late
Yes.
90s.
Yes.
And so just to give you an idea, when I first started working cyber investigations,
Hmm.
we would open a case on like a web page defacement. Okay.
Okay.
We didn't have the sophistication and complexity that we have today. So it was like web page defacements, but we would also have theft of trade secrets where maybe a disgruntled employee would walk out with a database on a thumb drive of all the
Yeah.
customers. Like that was big deal cases back in the early 2000s. Start fast forwarding and you start seeing cyber activity that would affect control systems. So think
Okay.
about Stuxnet. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Adi,
Hmm.
but
No.
Stuxnet, the nuclear centrifuges in Iran,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
right? Back in like 2010.
Okay. Yeah.
So now we're starting to up the game a
Uh-huh.
little bit. Then hacktivism. If you remember the group Anonymous or LulzSec would be another kind of offshoot, but basically hacking for a cause,
Oh,
activism, but hacktivism.
oh, sounds like Money Heist.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're spot on. And then continuing to get more sophisticated, like with ransomware, denial
Uh-huh.
of service.
Yes.
Yeah. Very long answer to a very easy question. I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah. So I've dealt with all of it, and each case presents its own challenges. Whether when you're conducting an investigation or you're investigating any activity, you need evidence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the bigger challenges or the biggest challenges with cyber is that most of our investigations have some overseas nexus.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So the challenge is, how do I get evidence from this other country or
Other
this other
country.
nation? And so we can
Mhm.
talk more about that. Yep.
Interesting you say that, but how do you feel when you go watch movies and FBI agents doing
Yeah.
stuff? Is it relatable to what you do? Just out of
Yeah,
curiosity.
it is. I always joke with my wife. We love watching all of the true crime
Okay.
material that's out there. So I do focus more on true crime versus the long running shows. But what they never show, it's so funny because obviously it's entertainment. So
Of
all you
course.
see is the action.
Action,
They
yes.
never show the agent or the investigator or the analyst type in the reports because that's not good TV, understandably. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's good. A lot of the shows they nail it, and you can
Wow.
tell that yeah, they're probably getting some level of consultation,
Okay.
from probably former FBI, I would assume.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
I would like to let our audience know that you had a TEDx talk about how you emphasize and
I
how do
did.
you need to acknowledge the cyber threat. Could you actually elaborate on what was your thought process and why you felt it was so critical, and what were your insights?
Yeah, thank you. I can't believe it's been 7 years. It was
Uh-huh.
like 2017 is when I gave that TED talk out there in California. So yeah, the motivation again 7 years ago, and I think it still applies today.
Hmm.
The motivation was basically we need to wake up. I think was the message
Yeah.
to the cyber threat.
Hmm.
And my thought at the time, and like I said, I think it still applies,
Hmm.
is that all of us in certainly Western society,
Hmm.
where if we're going to live and certainly if we're going to thrive as a people, we have to do that in a digital world.
Hmm.
And so to do that, to live in a digital ecosystem, if you will, we're forced to give up our data, our sensitive data, whether
Yes.
that's financial information. I think in the TED
Personal
talk, I had 3 different
Yes.
actual real life use cases
Yes.
like mortgage fraud, business email compromise. But
Yes.
whether it's financial, sensitive personal information, you name it, we have to give our information to third parties.
To survive.
And then on top of that, now that we've given that data, that information up, now we have to rely on those same third parties to protect it.
Yes.
And I think you and I and everybody listening would agree that's not happening at great efficiency.
Yes. True.
The FBI is not going out of business anytime soon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my job as a CISO is not going to go away either. But yeah, the fact that we have to give up our data to third parties and then rely on them to protect it is a scary thought. And
Yep.
so that was the message.
Hmm.
And I think back to that talk, and it was we need to wake up.
Yep.
And I kind of segue from that whole wake up
Yes.
phrase to, and I've heard this recently and I really like it,
Hmm.
where if you're in the FBI, you often get questions
Hmm.
from whatever audience you're engaging. And the question is typically to the FBI,
Hmm.
hey, FBI agent, what keeps you awake or what keeps the FBI awake at night?
Yep.
Right? Hear that all the time. And the answer, I believe, is not so much what keeps us awake, but what's happening while we sleep.
Yep. I heard that you say it before. I know. Yeah.
Exactly. And so never has that applied more appropriately than in cyber,
Yes.
where you're looking at literally a global criminal actor operating in every time zone that you can name. So
It's
yeah,
scary with the moment, the magnitude of
it's
possibilities you think
insane.
of it.
It's
It's insane.
absolutely insane.
Yeah. How did you transition from a FBI kind of a setup into enterprise, and
Yeah,
how were you able to adapt to this
it
environment?
was tough. I'll be honest. I was fortunate that the latter half of my career, I was working in a relatively modern,
Hmm. Okay.
in other words, cybercrime.
Hmm.
That skill set transitions well from government to industry versus, let's say, if I had been working on a bank robbery squad
Yeah.
or chasing fugitives.
Hmm.
Now, I will say that those guys had a lot more fun. And that is typically what you see in the movies and TV, back to our
Yep.
earlier point.
Yep. Absolutely.
But that skill doesn't transition as well to industry.
Hmm.
And so that helped. But I think the best way to put it, some of the difficulty when you're in the FBI or just say working in law enforcement, your mission is different. So the mission of the FBI is literally to protect the American people and
Yes.
uphold the Constitution. Like
Yes.
that is the FBI's mission.
Hmm.
When you get out into industry, That's not the mission, right? The mission is you got to make money, got to be profitable.
Yes.
So that was different, getting your mind
Into
wrapped
it.
around that. Now, working in cybercrime still as a CISO or
CISO.
consulting on security, you can still wrap some of that mission around
Yes.
your day to day, if you will. But yeah, so it was tough. I would say it probably took 2 or 3 years before I felt fully comfortable aligning myself or really taking
Okay.
on the label of retired FBI
Mhm.
versus, hey, I'm still in the FBI. But yeah, it's gone. I'll say that
So
at the end of the day.
as a CISO working with these current organizations, I'm sure you would have had your own share of learnings outside of FBI
Mm-hmm.
as well. So
100%.
how do you see in the last 5 to 6 years of your experience, how do you see that organizations are strategizing their way to handle cybersecurity?
Yeah. Dynamic threatscape. We'll just
Hmm.
start there, right? Totally dynamic. So it's always changing constantly. So I would say the best way to answer that question, how does the CISO strategize for like enterprises? For me, it's
Okay.
focusing on the basics, which I know sounds simple, but
Hmm.
if we can identify what those basic cybersecurity controls are
Hmm. Okay.
and make that the North Star for your
Okay.
program, for any enterprise program. And I think the natural follow-up question, John, what are the basics? So I'll answer that before you ask it. To me, the basics are typically the way I message this conversation in present day is I let or leverage the cyber insurance industry and I let them tell us the basics.
Okay.
So when you think of cyber insurance, they've had a difficult time, I'll put it that way, of pricing cyber insurance. When you look at the insurance industry,
Yeah.
when you look at auto and life, they have generations of data where they can set
Mhm.
price and relatively accurately predict lifespan and car accidents and data and statistics. They can't do that in cyber, it's too new. So what they do instead is they demand that their customers or prospects follow a certain set of security controls, whether
Mhm.
that's MFA, training and awareness, incident response, endpoint security. There are probably 10 to 15 controls
Mhm.
that I would
Yes.
consider basic controls.
Mhm.
And if we can focus on those
Mhm.
as an enterprise or an organization,
Mhm.
kudos. That's my answer.
Mhm.
And that's what helps drive the roadmaps that I build for organizations and helps drive strategy at all levels.
Mhm. So when we build, or rather, when the CTOs or CIOs want to build innovative solutions, of course, security most of the times is like an afterthought. Or
Yep.
there are some
Yep.
organizations who
There are.
think through
Yep.
at the same way. If you have to tell them something, how to
Hmm.
consider security by design,
Yep.
or security is a part of the evolution or innovation
Yep.
itself, how
Yep.
do you see this interplay between innovation and maintaining the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah. Yeah. Security has become a part of our DNA.
Hmm.
And I know as a security purist, that's easy for me to say versus talking to maybe a chief people officer
Hmm.
or maybe the CFO. But
Yeah.
even the CFO is going to have a
Hmm.
security awareness to
Yes.
his or her role. So for me, it's departmental,
Hmm.
certainly at the large organization at that level of size. It's getting the understanding that security is no longer a want to, but a have to.
Yep.
And again, going back to insurance, our jobs as CISOs and even CIOs
Hmm.
has been made a lot easier with today's landscape. And so by that, everybody has to have cyber insurance. Nobody wants to pay the highest premium. So we have to focus on security to get those premiums down. Most of us operate in an industry that has some level of regulatory
Hmm.
requirement.
Yes.
A lot of that regulation has security tied to it, right? I
Yeah.
think that's pretty obvious.
Hmm.
And then I would say a third is a little bit more subjective, but the fact that so many cyber events and breaches and incidents are happening above the fold, if you will, they're making headlines.
Hmm.
Boards of directors read those headlines.
Hmm.
The C-suite is reading those headlines and they want
Of
to
course.
know
Of course.
what are we
Yes.
doing, right? And so I think that's expanding security budgets, which is good.
Of course.
I would go back, Adi, to a great way.
Mm-hmm.
to get security messaging across all levels of the organization
Mm-hmm.
is through tabletop exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mentioned
Yes.
that in my intro, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we do at Trident Group is we run tabletops. And tabletops are becoming more and more of a regulatory requirement. It's vital to have these types of exercises to make sure that you have an ability to respond to an incident.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in a tabletop, you get all the department heads and stakeholders in the organization in one room.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have a up to 4 hour conversation around different scenarios and
Wow.
injections, right? What if this happens? Okay, what if we get hit with ransomware? Can you pay the ransomware? Will you pay the ransomware? What about data leak? Who's going to do the messaging, right? All of these injections are discussed in a tabletop, and that is a phenomenal way to get security understanding across the enterprise. Kind of
Wow.
went off on a tangent for you, but
It's
hope that
actually
was okay.
helpful. I think the
Yeah.
tabletop, how do you see various departments across the organizations embracing a horizontal security plan, if I may ask this question?
Again, tabletop. I just go straight to tabletop because you have a captive audience. Don't get me wrong, it's tough to get 15 executives in an organization to be able to set aside 4 hours block off, but it's critical, it's key.
It's
Once you
critical.
do that though, and everybody's in the room,
You have the buy-in.
you have horizontal messaging.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it is the soft skills, being able to explain the importance of security up and down the leadership chain.
Yes.
Can you speak up? Can you speak down?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a science, also an artful science, if you will. Yeah.
My understanding or my assumption is that AI has been prevalent, especially in the cybersecurity space, in terms of especially threat prediction, whatever you want to call it, or
Yeah.
in the earlier days. I'm sure FBI, the systems might have been a little more advanced than what was there in the available market. How do you see the journey of AI into cybersecurity? And with generative AI coming in, how do you really see the good and bad of it for cybersecurity?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the positive of LLMs and Gen AI, the positives for the FBI would be, again, like you just mentioned, like predictive
Mm-hmm.
analytics is what I would call
Mm-hmm.
it. Being able to ingest large amounts of data
Mm-hmm.
and somewhat accurately predict, with when I say data, like intelligence, right? Being able to
Yes.
feed hopefully redacted, anonymized intelligence into the models and come up with some level of forecasted behavior, if you will.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt I retired from the Bureau before Gen AI became a thing.
Yes.
But I think you and I were talking last week, and I was like, yeah, that could be really cool. I could see a lot of utility
Yes.
in that space. The negatives would be certainly from the criminal, what we call TTPs, tactics, techniques, and practices.
Mm-hmm.
Little acronym for you. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in the Bureau, we talk about TTPs on the part of the criminal actor. I would say just straight up social engineering,
Mm-hmm.
an incredible boon for the bad guy to be able to use or leverage Gen AI to hone your social engineering message, right? It's a joke for a long time, right? The Nigerian letter scam, right?
Yes.
And you got to where you could tell it was a scam because it was so poorly written.
Yes.
Yeah, those days are gone, right?
Yes.
AI is not
It's very authentic now,
yeah,
and it can
100%,
happen at scale.
100%. And then pile on top of that, or layer, I should say, the deep fake technology.
Mm-hmm.
I, it's just the volume of victimization is off the charts. Like the grandparent scam, where
Yes.
getting calls from kidnapped relative in another country and realism that can be put
Mm-hmm.
behind a scam like that now is just scary.
Yeah.
Flat out. And we're just scratching the surface. We are halfway through 2024. I can't even imagine what it's going to look like in a year. When you think about the criminal element, literally, this is their job day and night is
Mm-hmm.
to how do we leverage, we meaning bad guy, right? How do the bad guys leverage available tech
Yes.
to advance their nefarious
Yes.
purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, it's scary.
I'm also thinking if organizations decide to use Gen AI internal to them and make it available for everybody in the company or figure out
Mhm.
use cases,
Yeah.
even the information availability, which was harder before, is much more accessible now,
Yeah.
just for all the employees. So, how would you actually recommend a CIO or a CTO should actually go about building practices for these?
Yeah, I can answer it from just personal experience in the
Okay.
last 8 months. I've written numerous generative AI platform usage policy. I probably can
Okay.
get that a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more succinct. But basically, we're not going to blacklist OpenAI or Claude or Gemini because
Mm-hmm.
at that point we're playing whack-a-mole, right? The tech is popping up
Yes.
every other day. But instead, what we're going to do is we're going to address the behavior
Mm-hmm.
and mandate and with enforceable policy that we're not uploading sensitive information into the platform. Sensitive meaning what's sensitive to the company,
Mm-hmm.
customer data, PII, payment data, you name it. Again, it's a policy, it's a piece of paper, but we have to start somewhere. You mentioned CTO. I think that's right around the corner. Bucketizing or segmenting our LLM cloud, maybe like with something like Copilot, what Microsoft is doing, where we've got a contained environment for that type of data. But it's a tough one, and it's certainly one that company leaders are focused on. I know every day. How do we address this? We don't.
Okay, great. So, last question to probably wind up to help our audience understand, as you rightly spoke about these Gemini, OpenAI, all
Yeah.
these tools, right? For a data maturity initiative, like trying to understand and clean up the data and use the right AI systems in a company, what would be a good way to actually start defining these policies ground up? Is there a
Hmm.
direction you can give to our audience in defining privacy guidelines or probably sensitive information guidelines? We put
Yeah.
it.
Yep. Great question. One that I haven't heard straight up asked that way, but it's an area and a topic that I've been grinding on and focused on for the last couple of weeks, which is
Mhm,
data classification.
mhm.
What's ground zero for
Yes.
data security? And data security is a thing versus
Yes.
like information security.
Yes.
And data security, I would tie that to privacy. And how do we start that journey of data security or data protection?
Mhm.
And to me, it's classification. I think one of the greatest challenges for any organization is understanding what data do we have and how would we classify it.
Yes.
And so when I say classified data, I'm talking about, is it public? Is it internal? Is it confidential? Kind of working our way up the
Like a,
severity ladder.
yes.
And are we leveraging tools or tooling to help
Mhm.
get that classified? Microsoft O365 tools built in, depending on your license, what have you, a whole separate discussion. But really understanding what data do we have, and then what classification is it, and what do we need to do to protect the more
Mhm.
sensitive
Mhm.
classifications. So that to me is where we start, is truly with data classification and understanding our environment and our inventory. Like when you look at CIS,
Mhm.
the framework, the first two controls, or the first control really is asset identification or asset inventory. So
It's a
probably
great. It's
not
a
as
great.
articulate as an answer as you might have been looking for, but
No,
we can
no.
always double click on that after this.
It's a good start.
Yeah,
Probably that is where I think why probably organizations like yours come in to actually accelerate
yeah,
their journey, because this is not
yeah,
something what companies are used to do it on a yearly basis or whatever, right? Their central line of business is something else.
yeah,
But these are getting so critical and so important at some time they actually take the front seat.
yeah.
Like,
They
hey,
do, and there is no finish line. That's sounds cliche, but there really isn't. Yeah,
yes.
this is an ongoing process.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, John, thank you for your
All right, my man.
wisdom, sharing such a broad range of experiences with our listeners.
You got it.
Really excited to bring this live for our audience.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thanks for
Yes.
keeping it real. I think we did that,
Sure.
hopefully.
Sure. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Adi.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.